Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lounge. Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest questions facing many revenue leaders, which is how do you actually operationalize AI in a way that drives better business outcomes? And how should CROs think about things like AI, governance, data, systems, and the role that human judgment still plays in a world increasingly powered by intelligent agents? Joining me today is Adrian Rosenkranz, Chief Revenue Officer at Webflow. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I am excited to talk with you. So I usually like to start these podcast episodes with just a simple question, which is maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, your career journey and your background, and a little bit about your current role at Webflow.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Adrian Rosenkranz. I'm the CRO at Webflow. Got to Webflow about 1.5 years ago. I lead our go-to-market team, so sales, marketing, RevOps, support success, partnerships. And I had a very non-linear career, actually. So I've been in sales roles and quota carrying roles. I've been in sales strategy roles in marketing and demand gen. And over time, I think over all that time, I always thought to myself, how did I end up in this role? And I feel very fortunate now because in the world we live in today, where it really has become a world where we get to have a chance to harness intelligence with AI, all those experiences give me an opportunity to flex and use all those lived experience into how I might be able to harness intelligence. And I was so excited to join Webflow because as AI disrupts everything, one of the things that was really unique is AI is disrupting the way we consume information on the web. And Webflow is in a position to help people navigate that change, take advantage of not only how you build for the web, but how you make sure that your content is consumed on the web. And how you really, in my opinion, make digital experiences come to life. And so that's how I ended up at Webflow, and a little bit more about me.
Wonderful. Well, I think when we speak with others that who are leading revenue for organizations, they always share with us that like every single board meeting or executive leadership meeting seems to have some sort of component of what's our opportunity with AI, how do we operationalize it internally and align it with our go-to-market motions. And I think as AI gets more embedded into different organizations and their workflows, where do you see sort of like the draw the line between what remains sort of human judgment or intuition, what should be driven sort of more through systems, and what should be driven more through sort of automation of agents?
It's a great question, and I think we all just have to be curious about this question because it changes with time. I think the line I continually use is any action that's harder and harder to reverse and you can only have a one-way door through, then most likely we need more and more human ownership on it. So if it's public-facing, it definitely needs to have a human checkpoint, depending on the sensitivity and the impact it could have. Generally speaking, the way that I've approached it is really with one thing in mind. How do I help my teams and the people in my organization be with customers more? And so to me, that's the number one metric. And so as I walk my way back to that, well, what prevents people from being with customers more? Well, it's drafting, it's research, it's data prep, it's like surfacing up what's changed. So really the way that I like to approach this is how do we think about operationalizing all the things that prevent us from being with a customer so that we can be more effective with customers and we can be curious with customers, and that's really the orientation. So how do we make sure we make it as easy as possible to just accomplish that goal?
Could you maybe walk through an example of that? Like, so what are maybe some of the use cases that you're driving internally to help save time or make it easier to spend more time with customers?
So one of my favorite ones, and I'll share one that I do personally, and then maybe I'll share one that we can do that I do for the team. So one thing that I do personally is when the day wraps, I have a quick agent that goes through, pulls all my transcripts from the day, determines what's internal, what's been external. From that, it actually knows that if it's internal, we use Slack. So how do we create responses or recaps from that and action items? And it drops it into Slack as a draft for me to review and click send. And then for external, it typically uses email. So it'll draft a recap email with next steps and agreed upon actions. And so I have that just running every day at 6 o'clock. And that's just time that would normally take to go do those things. I have the same kind of flavor of it for the morning, where it looks at my calendar, looks at the meetings I have, gives me the prep docs that my teams have created, does research, and then gives me clear guidance as terms of what questions to ask, what areas might be stuck. So that's like at a personal level. I think as I think about the teams, one of the biggest area that we've been focused on is how do we think about empowering the team to have a system that just works for them. And so one of the tricky parts, if you kind of think about it, is if you're in sales, as an example, or in customer support, or in customer success role, you're struggling always to like connect all these systems. I think one of the things that's just a reality is over time, like we all wanted all our systems to be in one place, but we have it all in multiple places. And so one of the area my go-to-market engineers have been really focused on is how do you connect all the data systems? And so it gives them the opportunity to make it super quick to recap calls, just like I do, to be able to research customers, to have a point of view in terms of how do we actually pitch a customer. And so how do we take all the content and draft the slides for them. And so sometimes it's very tactical, and sometimes it's very automated, like in customer support, tier 1 support goes through an agent first.
Yeah. I love the dichotomy of kind of how you talk about like how you use it individually and then how you think about it for the team. I guess, when you and I were talking in the green room prior to this call, one of the things you made a distinction around was, things that RevOps should own, and things that individuals should sort of customize for themselves. So when you think about the different use cases, and I think you started to allude to it earlier, which is like when you have to have, maybe connecting different systems that have different information, that's something that RevOps should own. But I'm just curious, like to unpack that a little bit more, in terms of like what use cases or what systems should the individual own versus the organization.
This one is one that I've been really playing with. So this is where my current vision is in terms of how I would architect it. So I believe that every organization basically has like a shared handbook. That shared handbook is everything from what systems we use and what they're defined as, to meaning like what each field in the data, and normally it's databases, so what are those systems? What is the definitions? What is metric definitions as an example? And so there's the systems. Then there's also workflows. So do we have sales methodologies? What constitutes the renewal process? What constitutes a marketing qualified lead? And what are the key campaigns? And so there's a separation, I think, between there's the data systems, but then there's also just the workflows in the business. How do we define a book of business? What are the data points that go into that? And so as I thought about how we wanted to implement it, and what I encourage everyone to think about is each individual is always going to have their own, let's call it, set of skills, set of things that are customized to them that they're going to put into AI. The thing that I was really struggling with is how do I make sure that when anyone in my org asks a question, we actually make sure we go through a shared handbook first, because there's only going to be a handful of people who know exactly how all the contracts are stored and what when you say, hey, what are the special terms on a contract, whoever's asking, where to go get that and what the definition is. And so it really is an interesting cross-functional challenge, because once we get that shared handbook available to every user as in addition to their own set of workflows that they've wanted, we've now brought a collective knowledge. And so I think that's where I've been really focused, is how do we create this collective handbook, and let's call it ever-evolving knowledge base. And some of it is very static normally, like how we define a sales methodology or as an example, but then some is actually continually changing. So for example, we have an agent that works with our product marketing team to constantly update our ICP based off of calls, and that's creating a doc that is living. So, and that doc is accessible to the shared handbook. So everyone can get an up-to-date understanding if they have questions and want to understand our ICP. That's constantly evolving based on real customer conversations. So that's how I've been thinking about it. That's a shift because in the past, I didn't really connect the dots on the power of what a shared handbook or a shared system could look like in complementing an individual. But that's where I've arrived.
Yeah, I love that. I think and that's actually something I have not heard before, and I think there's a lot there. And I also think it starts to play a little bit at a big issue that folks have, which is around providing the right governance and sort of guardrails. And I think that shared playbook is a way to help make sure that you've got the right governance or guardrails. But some see that as be like a constraint, governance and guardrails being a constraint on innovation. But it seems like you're suggesting kind of the opposite. Why do you believe governance is actually an enabler for AI adoption and scale?
Yeah, I really believe governance is an enabler because, there's no one I haven't talked to that doesn't come up with like the best skill on my teams. I think people are really creative. They come up with really cool ways of using AI, and everyone thinks they have the best one, or it might be the best one for them, which I think one of the powers of today is that you can have personalized intelligence, that it's really crafted to how you want it and how you like it. But the governance that I'm really looking to institute is things that are much more deterministic and we know the answer to. When someone asks, and I like to use contracts because contracts are very fixed once they're signed. So using that contracts example I was mentioning, when you want to know what is in the contract with a customer, you want to make sure you get it right. And the advantage of having a shared system or a shared, effectively, context that everyone works together off of is that when someone wants to know an answer of something that's really, there is one answer, it should know how to get to that. It shouldn't have to learn each time. It shouldn't have to, and it shouldn't be a person guessing. And so the person who actually set up that system or set up what we want people to understand should be managing it in perpetuity. And so that's an example where you can get someone the wrong answer and all of a sudden governance slows people way down. And so I think that's how I think about the governance piece is I do want local innovation. We'll call it whether it's regional or whether it's at the individual contributor level, like local innovation is amazing, but empowering them to innovate is about, in my mind, how they show up for customers better. And they can show up for customers better if we're able to surround them with things that make them accurate at being able to create these new ways of approaching things.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful, and I think that the way that you framed that, as far as like governance being the way to sort of make sure that things are determined, that you can access the deterministic data as a way to sort of accelerate, some of the other use cases is really, really powerful. The question I wanted to go back to though is when you at the top of the call you talked about like connecting systems, and I think that when we speak with folks and we talk about the different sort of initial use cases or testing that they've done with AI, a lot of them have come back maybe underperforming because the underlying data wasn't trustworthy enough or it wasn't complete enough. And so when you talk about connecting systems, I think, what do you believe are sort of the fundamentals that are required to make sure that you can trust the outputs that are influencing the business decisions that you're making?
The data strategy question is one that I've lived for a long time, having come from Tableau before, and it really is a fundamental problem. And I think there's two parts to that problem. There's the part that I think is much more controllable, faster with a process change that we're making. And then the other one is maybe more of a question of your overall data strategy. So the overall data strategy is if you have data going into places and you don't understand what it is and things are mixed and it's hard to define, there's no semantic context of like what everything's defined as. And then you're going to have a problem. But let's assume that is set up in a way. But now it's really translating the data from whatever database. It could be your CMS like Webflow. It could be your CRM. It could be whatever database you're using. It doesn't, data asset management. And how do you translate that to a user? And so this is where it's interesting because the way that we used to do it was really kind of people just kind of did what they were going to do, and if they knew how to figure it out, they would. And so certain things where like certain types of tools where it's not as a big a database, it's simpler to use, or it was easy, people could just use it on day one. Like for example, when you connect Claude to Slack, it's like send message, receive message. It's not complicated. They could just do it right away. But on the other hand, when it starts to get more complicated is when you're like business performance. And what occurred to me is like going back to the shared handbook concept and creating a shared user context that loads on every prompt for everyone. It occurred to me that I actually needed to have my different teams who work closely in that workflow or data actually can own the context that is provided to everyone. So the example I'll give is the RevOps team. We've go-to-market engineers. They do a wide range of things, but we have different people who are more experts in different areas. And the new way is that they will own a skill that is actually shared by a lot of people that actually has the definitions, explains what's in Salesforce, or what's in our contracts with Ironclad or whatnot. And so someone is owning that, and they have to keep that up to date. And it's interesting because I'd say in the past it was much more, you'd make it once, you do an enablement, you forget about it, but now it's just making sure the agent knows how to do it each time. And there is now this it's a puzzle piece that all has to fit together, which each teammate has their assignment. I mean, I played football in college, and we always said, like, you worry about your assignment. And if you do your assignment and someone else does the assignment, the play goes well. And I think that's where we're moving, is that each team has to do their assignment really well and maintain it so that the system works.
So what do you think the core infrastructure that's needed inside a modern go-to-market organization to really make this effective? I think one of the interesting things that I've recently learned is people are sort of making sure that they've got separate sort of systems of orchestration, systems of context, systems of action, rather than just trying to have AI reason over everything. And the reason is, the context is individual to your individual company, your business rules, how you define different segments and things like that. But I'm starting to lead the question, I guess. I would just love to understand from you, like, what do you think sort of the core infrastructure that's needed to make this work inside of an organization most effectively?
Right, and so I think there's the data and governance with permissions, auditability. You need to be able to understand and have a trail, not only of who can do what, but what has happened. I mean, using just Webflow as an example, when we think about a website, when you have an agent making changes, you want to know what those changes are, just like you'd want to know what a human does. So I think that's one part of the infrastructure, is you have to have auditability, observability there, and clear permissions. Without those permissions, what we found is at first, when I just rewind the clock, like, I'll be very honest, we just turned it on and see what people do. And, there's innovation, but then also there's people that are getting answers that are actually not what I would define as correct or the best use of their time. I always say it's really fun to use AI sometimes, but did it actually help you do your job more effectively? So there's the permissions and auditability. I think the other part is the shared building blocks concept that we were just talking about. So that's a reusable set of skills and workflows that people can grab and run. This is where, like, our legal team worked closely with our RevOps team, and we have all our contract data and legal questions and all the negotiations we've ever done, like, aggregated into a skill that is now allows, like, a salesperson or a success person or a support person to access that history of, like, how we respond to questions to get really effective answers without maybe needing the legal resource yet. But that's continually maintained, and it's reusable by multiple teams. But the workflow has to do with understanding the contracts people have with us. So I think the shared building blocks is really critical. This is to be able to scale. So permissions, shared building blocks, and the last one is the connected data. And this is where I really rely on the combination of the RevOps team, the go-to-market engineers specifically, with our IT team, of really understanding where is the data that people need access to, and how do we make sure not only that it's connected, but defined. I think one of the biggest gaps is, if I gave people in my org all access to Snowflake data, they wouldn't know what the definitions are, and they could get wrong answers.
Yeah. Curious, like, when you think about the measurement of these investments or the measurement of the productivity gains, How are you thinking about that? Like what is it that you're looking to measure, and how can you measure that?
So it depends on which part of the business. It's interesting, I think. For example, with our customers, one of the most important things when I think about what a website is meant to do and how to bring a digital experience and have it come alive, because they can become dynamic now with Gen AI, with AI creating different experiences, is just are they publishing more? Are they able to bring more into the world, bring that creativity to life? And so with something like the website, I really believe that if they're able to launch more, if that's with more creativity to get business performance, that would be an example. That's how I hold our marketing team accountable too. I want to know that, like, if you're using AI working with Webflow as an example, is that the output? On the sales side, it's customer time. Like, are we getting more customer calls? Are we getting more time with customers? Because I think looking at closed won deals is too slow. I want to know that we are able to get on more customer calls because we're using AI effectively. There's also, in marketing campaigns, are we getting better conversion through it? In support, is our CSAT at par with humans or better? Because it should be better because we have more access to knowledge. And so my suggestion and what you're hearing from me is I don't have an aggregated view. I do have an aggregated opinion that AI for go-to-market should mean you're with customers more. And that's a measure that I would use as success. But as I look at each team and how they're using AI, what can be accomplished, there is sub KPIs that help you get a sense of, is this helping us or not, and how efficient is it?
Yeah, it's like the lagging indicator is are we spending more time with customers? The leading indicators are sort of those sub metrics that you just spoke about. More calls, so on and so forth, in order to be able to measure that. So I think that's really interesting. Has there been a use case that you've tried or maybe seen others try that really sounds compelling, but hasn't really produced any value in outcomes?
Oh gosh, I can't even. I could name so many. I wonder what would be the most interesting one. Well, okay, I'll share one that I tried yesterday that kind of that I personally tried that wasn't so great. So one of the things that I realized is that for external interactions that I have, it's actually much more effective when I have my voice skill. I have all this context about the account. I have it in Salesforce. Meaning when I'm working with a customer or a partner or anyone outside of Webflow, it's really effective. What I'm realizing is internal, and I don't know about your experience in this too, but internal, the data sits kind of in all unstructured Slacks a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And so while we do use different tools and document tools, a lot of it is unstructured Slacks. So I find it has a much harder time. I built something that I've been testing out. I call it the follow-through agent that basically goes through and looks at all my Slacks and looks at my meeting history and who I've met with and attempts, it never sends it because I've been too nervous about what it sends. It drafts responses all over my Slack. So when I wake up in the morning, it overnight has gone through my Slack and drafts responses. So I have 20 to 25 draft responses in Slack. Right now, I maybe send one. And that's because it has a really hard time grokking not how I sound, but how to respond. And I realized that there's just so much internal context that isn't documented that makes it hard. Whereas with external, I have call recordings, I have a combination of deal history, I have contract history, I have support case history, I have all this stuff that we've saved. And so that was my big aha moment, is that I have to figure out how to make the data more effective. Because I have the same workflow for external and internal in a way, and the internal one has a way harder time of getting it accurate. Some of them are pretty funny because, but on the flip side, what I'd say is when I have a forecasting agent run every week for the business, that one is actually pretty spot on because it's a combination of taking internal transcript meetings from our forecast calls mixed with there's actual deals and external, and that one works. So that's kind of my where I'm finding the more internal I get, the harder it is to replicate what I would do without it.
Yeah, on that one that you mentioned, where it's this, Slack, it's generating sort of the responses for you, and it's not quite getting it right. Are you finding yourself sort of reviewing them and going, and then creating it from scratch, or are you kind of editing them to, instead of being author, you're just kind of the editor to make it fit? I'm just curious, like if there's any time savings at all because it's directionally accurate, it just needs to be refined.
Well, the area that it does give me time savings is it does bring up which ones I should respond to. So, it drafts all these responses. I'm like, I actually should. So where it gets it right every time is we just closed a deal, or we had a great customer story win, or there is a great performance. And like when there's something that's celebratory and it's just like engaging in the channel, it typically gets it right because the context is all within that thread normally. Where it gets it wrong is when it starts to get much more complicated. Like when we're talking about the strategy with a customer, whether it's adoption or whether it's sales, or how we think about like a marketing strategy with ABM or whatnot, it gets much more complicated because it just doesn't connect the dots. And so that's kind of but I will say that I find myself 50% of them I respond to anyways. And then maybe I'd say I get 20-ish in a day. I'd say 1 to 2 I don't have to edit at all. I'd say then the next 12 to 13 I'll just change with context that I have, and then some I'll just delete.
Yeah, really interesting. Just a couple more questions for you. So I would be interested to hear your perspective, I guess maybe looking ahead a couple of years. What do you think the best revenue organizations understand about AI that most companies still don't quite get or understand?
I think the answer to that question is the opposite. What do they understand about humans that not what they understand about AI? So I think if I look a few years down, and this is how I'm thinking about it now, what is it that's like right now, I know that we're focused on AI. Other CROs I talk to, everyone is kind of trying to figure that, what are the right workflows, the use cases that just empower the team. The biggest question I actually have is constantly, where are people better and why? And so I'm actually focused on the opposite. So it might be counterintuitive, but I really do believe that there is, when you're making a long-term bet on Webflow as an example, you want to know that the person on the other side is there with you. I think there's a point where that becomes really true. And, yes, today we're seeing a 125% increase in bot traffic from LLMs to Webflow's 300,000 plus customers, and 58% of traffic on the web is no longer human, according to Cloudflare. And so these things are changing. So there's the first part of an experience that might be completely intermediated by AI. But when you get to the point of really where you're making a final decision, you're going to bet your career on a decision potentially, that I want there to be a human-to-human relationship. So that's what I've been really focused on, is where humans are going to bring something that I can't recreate. And then I have my go-to-market engineers trying to take everything else.
Yeah. No, I love that reframe and the way you position that. Adrian, I'm going to ask, my daughter just walked in my door. We're going to edit this out, of course, but can I just put it on pause for a moment? What's the matter, Bid? Tell mommy I'm recording a podcast. I'll have to. Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Let's talk about humans. That's things that we struggle with every day.
My daughter was crying a minute ago too.
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna as we kind of get back in, and just the instructions for Baswati when you edit this out, just sort of at the conclusion of the last answer that Adrian gave. Let's make sure that we just sort of start at the top with this next question. So, last question for you. I guess what is your perspective on the competitive advantage that companies will still have, or what will remain as more and more companies sort of implement AI and sort of are all using the same models? What's the moat that companies have that they can still take advantage of, assuming that we're all eventually going to have this integrated into our systems?
Great question. The way I like to think about it is, what is it that an LLM doesn't have that is within your business? And that's your moat. And so an LLM doesn't have the people on your team and the creativity of putting those people together and putting those people together to harness the intelligence that LLM provides. It doesn't have the customer relationships you have. It doesn't have your systems of record. It doesn't have your context. And I think the way that I've been really trying to understand is how do you create an inventory of those things, of the things that it doesn't have, that your teams have only because you're together. And I think the only way you can unlock that, though, is you have to invest in AI fluency. This is why we have builder days where we had people an entire day just dedicated to go build things, why we're creating a shared skills library, why one of the things that I'm realizing is if everyone creates a set of shared of skills, like what if you create a project that forces, and this is what I was talking about a lot earlier, this shared handbook or this shared user context that everyone has, and I say, okay, great, everyone can have their own like RevOps, marketing ops, which by the way, I've combined into one at this point because I don't think there needs to be separate ops teams, it's just one. How do we bring it all together so that we create a system? And then when you have that system, how do you make sure there's fluency for people to use it? And then the last thing I'll say is I think the biggest moat of all, and we've seen it all over the news, is how do you turn it into results? So we've seen all over the place, some people are saying that they've burned through so many tokens and they blew through their entire budget, and yet they don't have the outcomes that they wanted. And so I think we have to be real about how really the goal is how do you turn intelligence into results? If you can't turn intelligence into results, then you don't have an advantage at all.
Right, 100%. Okay, so I just want to ask you, I want to basically transition into what we call the lightning round, and I'm just being cognizant of time, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I guess it'd be 4 questions because one of them is a 2-part answer. So what is the favorite part of being a CRO at Webflow?
Spending time with customers.
Okay, I love that. What about the flip side of that question? What's your least favorite part?
Oh, I love to travel, but it does require a lot of travel. And so, I think I love to travel, and it's a lot of travel. So it'd probably be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's traveling used to be a lot of fun, right? When you were younger, you had more energy, and now it's like I don't really have a lot of time to travel, or I've got a lot of other things that travel's kind of killing my productivity. So I completely relate with that. What's one interview question that you always ask when bringing on a new frontline sales leader?
Oh yeah, I always like to ask if I'm in a board meeting and a customer comes to you and you're trying to get the biggest deal of the year done, and I'm unreachable, and you need my approval. What do you do?
Yep, love it. Last question: if you weren't CRO, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't CRO, I would.
Or in sales. If you weren't in sales, what's one thing you'd maybe interest lie or passion or something that you'd do differently?
Oh yeah, I love to be outdoors. I love to hike. I love to kite ski. I love to kite surf. I love to ski. So I'd probably be living by a mountain somewhere with my family to make sure that we could take advantage of the winter. Because as much as I love it in San Francisco not having a winter, I'd love to ski. Yeah.
I mean, so I lived there for a couple of years back in like 2005 to 2008, and great city, love everything about the Bay Area. But man, we just take day trips to Tahoe, right? And have a great ski day. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, where here I am in Chicago, Midwest, cold winters, but there's not a whole lot to do.
I love it. We have an office in Chicago, so I get out there pretty often. I really love Chicago, but it is cold.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, listen, I wanted to say thank you so much for your time. This was really insightful. I appreciate all the insights. And next time I'm in the Bay Area, if you're in town, we'd love to get together with a cup of coffee or something.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, great. Well, that's another episode of the Revenue Lounge. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.